Hey there, Adam here, and this is the fourth George Orwell related video that I've done in less than a year, so I think that warrants a George Orwell playlist. I've added it and I'll link to it down below. And I still have at least two more Orwell related videos coming because the previous ones were looking at graphic novels about or based on the works of George Orwell, and I still haven't even gotten to his two most famous works, Animal Farm and 1984. So when I get through all there are many versions of those as graphic novels, and I'm going to try and read through all of them that I can find. And when I've done that, I will compare them and pick which one I think is best and so on. So stay tuned for those videos, subscribe if you haven't, and so on. So Thomas Pynchon has a new novel coming out in just a few weeks, and it's a surprise. I thought, he had sold his writings, the actual papers, to the Huntington Library. He had made the movie, or he hadn't made it, but he'd sold the rights to Inherent Vice like 10, 11 years ago, and they made that movie. So it seemed like he was just like preparing to retire and not do anything else. And then boom, we get not only this novel, but also another adaptation from P.T. Anderson, One Battle After Another, which is, I'm told, loosely based on Vineland, his Pynchon's novel that came out, I can't remember, somewhere in the 80s, I think. And I haven't read it in a million years, so I barely remember it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I was going to actually go see it. It's released today in Malaysia, but I remembered in Malaysia, they have a very 1984-ish policy with movies. They will censor things out, and it's stupid. I saw Superman here and they edited out a kiss, and I said, I'm not going to see movies in a country where they treat people like 5-year-olds. But I will see that and maybe review it when it comes out digitally. And United States has also just had its own sort of 1984, well, we've been living through a 1984 moment for quite a while, but specifically the Jimmy Kimmel incident where he was suspended and then reinstated, and what his future looks like, who knows. But the orange one seems to be getting wilder and wilder, as I think he's going to be dead next April. That's my prediction, April 2026. I don't know why. Something tells me that in my psychic powers. Anyway, this video is mainly about the essay that Pynchon released with an edition of 1984, came out in 2003, and there's a lot of parallels with that moment, the early Bush administration, George W. Bush, and the Iraq War and things like that. So we have our own parallels there. But it's interesting to see him writing. I just wanted to comment on a few things. I kind of hoped, as one of the few Pynchon writing as himself moments in his oeuvre, that we might get some biographical insight, maybe even just saying when he first encountered Orwell and what he was reading and how he perceived it. But we don't get that. We instead just get a more or less literary essay from the point of Pynchon's view in 2003. And like many essays on Orwell and commentaries, they like to comment on what people get, what our world has neatly fit into Orwell's view of 1984. Like, how does our world resemble 1984? I think, some things George Orwell got very right, like the omnipresence of screens. What he didn't get right was that they would be personal computers. So instead of like screens on walls, which we have too, but more common, I think, is just the, personal screen, which instead of having these 2 minutes of hate, we have doom scrolling, unlimited hate, personalized to every person, so that even if we're living in totally different filter bubbles, we can all have our own moments of hate. And also both Orwell and Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, neither of them really could anticipate AI. There were hints of robotics and things like that, but not quite to the vision that started to emerge in like the 50s, 60s in science fiction, with this idea that robots and AI would be more powerful and pose a threat to humanity's very existence. And we are living in that moment of, we don't know what the world's going to look like in 2040, like 15 years from now. But everyone seems to agree that it's either going to be incredibly wonderful or incredibly horrible. There's no middle ground. Pynchon also has some interesting points about how Nazi Germany might have been just a warm-up for some future horrendous fascism that we can barely even anticipate. And coupled with AI, if that somehow works together, which is very plausible, like it could very well be even worse. Pynchon also seems to be touching on some things about the detective novel, which is appropriate since his next novel in 2009, Inherent Vice, would be sort of an alt detective novel. So I'm wondering at what point he began Inherent Vice. Was he already working on it? Just as I wonder with Shadow Ticket, when did he begin writing this? Because there were letters that I think were published about Pynchon saying at different points, like in the 70s, that he had these massive books that he was working on, the ideas that he wanted to, and it seemed like maybe they were like, Mason and Dixon, Gravity's Rainbow, and Against the Day, but who knows when, because of the fact that we don't get interviews with Pynchon, we don't get much biography, he doesn't want to release anything. So it's hard to say when he began things. But if you look at like Mason and Dixon, there's a lot of, whenever he conceived it, there was clearly him touching on like references to things that were happening in the 90s. So I'm guessing that we're going to get some, I feel like this, my intuition is that this, because of its shorter length, is a book that he's written since Bleeding Edge, his last released novel. I hope that's the case. I hope it is. I'm always curious to see what people are thinking about, not what they were thinking about 40 years ago. Although that can be interesting too. But, I'm hoping he'll do some lambasting of Trump and the current administration, but who knows? One final thing that I thought was interesting in Pynchon's essay, he talks about how the party in 1984, their goal is to abolish the orgasm. I don't remember that exactly. It's been a long time since I read the actual text of 1984. I'm still reading through the graphic novels, like I said, but I found that interesting because Pynchon's talking about how sexual desire is subversive and kind of beyond the control of the party or whatever. And I think it's not, I don't know if it's ironic, but but when Orwell was writing 1984, when Huxley was writing Brave New World, pornography at the time was very, not an industry, not the level that it is today. And even since 2003, it has become an enormous industry, and also fused with social media in forms like OnlyFans and things like that. It's become even more omnipresent in the world, which is interesting. So the idea or the claim that Pynchon makes that, sexual desire is beyond the scope of commodification or fascism or power control hierarchies, I think has kind of dissolved, because nowadays it can be easily commodified. It's everywhere in our world, and to varying degrees, from privatized Instagram accounts to whatever. So it's like even that less vestige of, it's also coupled with AI and using that to personalize experiences, means that this is one more aspect of things that we thought were beyond the scope of control are very easily controlled now. So it's a thought-provoking essay, and I do recommend it. Like all of Pynchon, I found it worth reading. I do prefer his fiction though. But if you've read this 1984 essay, what do you think? And let me know if you're going to be reading Shadow Ticket. I will, of course, and I will review it on my channel. So subscribe if you haven't, and I hope to see you there soon.